I got him for Lauren. I just had dinner with the Obama, what did you do? Hop up on Twitter talking about the stuff you don't do. Rock off for Lauren, shorty, cause that is what you gon' do. Sabi out of New Balance, some style.
Third down and 6, right up the gut. That is Gibson, and he is gone. Third of the ball game for the rookie Antonio Gibson.
Farms at the farms, all you hear is oi. One time for BDR, we just try and see you out. I used to be with Nas, beating every city up. Watch who you talking to, I'm respected by the...
Picked up, and Mullins fumbles the football. Washington has it back. Chase Young, they're chasing him down the sideline. And Chase Young has a Washington touchdown.
I've been ungrateful but thankful. I've been ungrateful but thankful. Maybe I got it all too fast and too soon. Been living life, no feelings, no rules. And I've been trying to make it last, make it move. But I'ma hop in this foreign and like a fool. I've been ungrateful, I'm thankful.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Burgundy Network podcast. This episode is brought to you by 500 Level. I'm proud to announce that the Burgundy Network podcast has reached a long-term agreement with 500 Level, who specializes in officially licensed t-shirts to help you rep your favorite teams and players, like this one here for those watching on YouTube. And if you're just listening to the podcast, just imagine a very comfortable, stylish t-shirt. Makes me go from a 3 to a solid 6. So I will take it. But joining me today, as always, from the Burgundy and Gold Reports, Adam Aniba. What's going on, Adam?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Doing good. I got Nate Coleman, a.k.a. Nate the Great. That's a new nickname I just thought of this morning. Nate, how you doing, bud?
That's really original. Hey, don't sell yourself short there. You're a solid 8, buddy, and I don't care what anyone says.
I appreciate it. Nasty Nate. And D Mac serving up pancakes from Miami, Ohio, offensive lineman. What's going on, Donovan?
How we doing? I got the ring like you mentioned last time.
There you go.
That's all right. If you're listening to the podcast, you're missing out. You missed a shirt and a D1 championship ring. And Nate, which is always just a blast. So today we are going to talk about some defensive players from the Senior Bowl. If you missed the last episode, we talked about the offense, which is obviously a big need for us. But if you watch the Super Bowl, the talk of the week was linebackers and how defense wins championships. So Nate, would you agree that defense does in fact win championships?
I mean, listen, you know what I'm going to say. It's
wide receivers win routes.
No, I mean, it's you got to have all three sides of the field working together. But I mean, it helps when you're balanced and you're good at everything. So yeah, obviously defense plays a big role. And for a team like us, I mean, Tampa Bay is the ultimate blueprint in a lot of ways because we can build our way up to them. We just need a Hall of Fame quarterback that might be the GOAT. So.
Shoot, we might get Tom Brady next year. He's the only one we haven't talked about, so we got to keep an eye on the Brady watch. But last year we were the San Francisco 49ers up and coming, and now we're trying to build like the Buccaneers. So we're just going to copy everybody. Just if you got somebody, we want them. So today we're going to talk about some key guys that were at the Senior Bowl, and then we're going to wrap that up. And then I talked to Twitter, and everybody wants us to talk about linebackers, so that's pretty much where we're going to be heading after this. And we're going to hit on some linebackers that are at the Senior Bowl, a couple that you definitely need to keep an eye on, one in particular that I really like. But outside of the Senior Bowl, there's a lot of great options. So we can find our Devin White that everybody wants, or David, who is a free agent also that everyone apparently thinks we're going to just magically get. He's just going to leave Tom Brady and all that cap space that Tampa Bay has. So we're going to break it down for y'all. I want to start out asking Adam, I'm asking you a question. Do you see Washington this offseason pulling a San Francisco and trading one of the D linemen like they did Buckner for draft capital?
We've been saying this since we started being on the show together that I definitely could see that happen because when you have an abundance and then there's a need, I think there'll be offers. The question is, will the offers be lowball? And I think this is where we're going to see Mayhew and Hurney really, what are they going to be able to do? Because everyone talks about draft and evaluation, how the war room's going to be. But these are the kind of situations, this kind of offseason is going to determine, I think, how successful they can be in the short term. Because if they can pull off just, a couple moves to really make this, team better, for instance, move a Matt Ioannidis or even a Settle, for something that's, in the realm of a second, third round pick, which might be, reaching for the stars a bit, but those are the kind of moves that get you recognized. And I'll say it before we talk about 49ers, a team that I look at is the Colts, and I look what they did, how they got DeForest Buckner. But one thing they did is before they added that piece, they had their middle linebacker in place. I know we're going to talk about linebackers, but Darius Leonard is the reason I got into small school.
Top three linebacker in the league, probably.
I was able to, get a great Q&A with him, a few years back, and unbeknownst to me, after 2 years, he was going to be an NFL prospect. So it just shows that you can find middle linebackers in all places, but I think when you have established ones in the league right now, you got to make a run for them. You talk about, is he going to leave Tampa Bay? But, money talks. We've seen that. And, being with Tom Brady is one thing, but that's a short-term thing. Being with Washington and with the ability to play with Chase Young, Montez Sweat, and some of these guys, I think that Washington finally has something that's really appealing with the coaches and that defensive line that can attract free agents, especially on the defense side.
Yeah, when you have that D-line and you're a linebacker, that makes your job so much easier. And then you have Del Rio, who, worked with some great linebackers and just a defensive-minded coach. And then Ron Rivera, who was a linebacker himself, had Luke Kuechly, one of the greats of our era. So it's definitely intriguing. Obviously, you have to kind of weigh in. Is he willing to leave Tampa Bay? And there's going to be a ton of free agents we'll talk about. But what did the San Francisco 49ers even get for Buckner? Do you remember? Was it a second? It was a first?
I thought it was a first-round pick.
So, I mean, you have to really think about that. If that helps us trade up in the draft to get a top 5 pick to get a quarterback,
right?
Do you trade a guy like Matt Ioannidis?
It was a win-win for both things because they got Kinlaw and then they ended up getting him. So to me, it was a win-win. But Buckner, it was just a situation where they weren't going to be able to pay both guys, and that's going to come to head for Washington one way or another with Daron Payne, Allen, and Ioannidis. So it's going to be: are you ahead of it or are you behind it? Washington's continually been behind the ball. Like I said, let's hope they're ahead of it this time.
Yeah, I mean, that's great draft capital, and Buckner still balling, and Indianapolis had a great season. So just something to keep an eye on. But I was really thinking about that as I was looking at the D-line. We talked about it, the draft class and the interior D-linemen, specifically at the Senior Bowl, is pretty weak. I feel like last year was a lot better. I will say the edge this year had some pretty solid players. It's really coming together as we get closer to the draft. So I want to start there first, talk about the edge. Obviously we have Montez Sweat and Chase Young, but, we don't know what's going on with Kerrigan. We might need that young piece. We saw us get Jason Smith-Williams last year. We're all like, oh, another D lineman. Like, that's kind of surprising to us. Got some good amount of snaps this year, so you just don't know what's going to happen with Kerrigan. So to me, I was like, this might be an option for us in a later round. Obviously, we're not going to go first round, get another edge rusher. I just don't see that happening, but you never know. So for me, I'll start it. I really looked at the later round guys, and someone that stood out to me was actually from my old college at Coastal Carolina, Go Chants. Taron Jackson, actually got to see him play a couple times in person and practice in person before the Senior Bowl. So I knew he was going to be one of those guys, but once I saw him get the invite to Mobile, I was like, finally, Coastal's on the map. A lot of players coming into the draft, but he's one of those developing guys. They said eventually they could see him as a starter in the NFL, which was kind of surprising to me, but I was looking at some Draft Network and then obviously talking to Jordan Reed about him. And he had a great season, 18 sacks and 26.5 tackle for losses in the last 2 seasons alone. So really been one of the monuments of that defense for Coastal, which, as we saw, tore up BYU. So that was one of my guys. I know y'all probably had some bigger names. So I'm kind of going off the board, thinking smaller school guys or even later round guys. But Nate, who was someone on the edge that stuck out to you?
Yeah, I'd have to go with Rashad Weaver from Pittsburgh. I thought he looked really good. It sounded like all 3 practices he was really strong at the point of attack, and he was just keeping a offensive lineman off of balance with that power move, and then he'd switch it up and do some finessing and some bull rushing. So I thought he looked really good. The big thing with Washington is depth. And when I think about depth, I always think about what happens if a starter goes down. Like, what type of position are we in? I know that sounds really obvious, but I mean, if you think about any of our positional groups besides interior defensive line, I mean, man, you get really nervous, right? If you're talking about cornerback and what happens if Kendall Fuller goes down, or what happens if Cam Curl goes down. And that's what I always am thinking about, especially on defense. So Senior Bowl is a great opportunity to just look at these guys and look for some depth. But there was a lot of really good edge players I liked. And what was cool during the Senior Bowl is you got to see a lot of them switch to the interior. And part of the reason for that was they had to play in the interior because they didn't have a lot of interior defensive linemen to begin with. But on the other hand, for NFL teams, they want to see that versatility. They want to see you be able to go on the inside during nickel sub packages where you can rush from the inside and create some of those one-on-one mismatches that we like to see. So I think it's good to show your versatility, be able to win on the inside and win on the outside.
Yeah, Pittsburgh has a ton of dudes actually on the defensive side. Paris Ford is a guy that I've been watching since he went to Pitt. But especially on the D-line alone, I think they had 2 guys alone on the D-line. They had Hamlin, who was like a hybrid player, play a little bit of linebacker, a little bit of sub-package defender, but definitely someone to keep an eye on. I agree with you with the whole depth part, and that's what I really think why we drafted Smith Williams last year. But still, like you said, you just never know when someone goes down what's going to happen. Donovan, who's someone that you were taking a look at?
Yeah, I really like Quincy Roche out of the U. I think he had a good week, especially in one-on-ones, taking a look at those. Showed some really good technique. I think he gets overshadowed, not by play because Rousseau didn't play last season, just by the name. We all know Gregory Rousseau is out of the U, and so I think part of that he gets overshadowed a little bit. But to Nate's point about depth, it's a great point because I think sometimes we forget Ryan Kerrigan is probably not going to be here on this team next year. I mean, Ryan Anderson is probably not going to be on this team next year. I mean, those are 2 of your main backups on the edge that you have James Williams, but outside of that, you might have to draft someone in the late rounds to fill that kind of backup role.
Yeah, Miami is actually cranking out a bunch of dudes too. Phillips was another guy, and like you said, Rousseau sat out. But I was excited to see Roche because he transferred from Temple. Mm-hmm. One of those guys that just transferred in. It kind of sucks that one of your best players sits out when you transfer in to try to win a national championship, but they're cranking out a bunch of dudes too. But I know the biggest thing everyone wants to talk about right now is linebackers for sure. We watched Tampa Bay, like we said, in the Super Bowl. All these linebackers flying around, making Pat Mahomes look crazy. Offensive line obviously sucked. So I want to take a look at a couple of guys, but the one that stood out to me was Baron Browning from Ohio State. To me, the way he measured in 6'3", 241, had a long wingspan, that's the kind of guy that we need. Obviously, you'll see me talking, Adam, too, about guys like Zaven Collins and some of the top guys at a possible 19 pick. But for me, Baron is a guy in like the 3rd round range where he could easily come in, be that coverage linebacker that we don't have right now, and possibly start right away. I mean, we thought we'd get something out of Thomas Davis last year, and he was terrible. I feel like we still don't have that will linebacker. And I saw someone today say, what about Reuben Foster? I'm not even putting any weight into Reuben Foster. I don't see him even playing. So if you actually consider him an option, don't. We need more reliability than that. So Baron Browning, to me, it was like that guy. I was like, you see this cute girl at the mall, you're out of town, and you leave. And you're like, man, I'm probably never going to see her again. I was like, I pray one day I see Baron Browning one more time at the draft going to Washington. But he has great burst, high football IQ, above average tackler. Like I said, I can see him as that will backer that we just don't have right now in our 4-3 defense. Possibly, replacing KPL and Cole Holcomb at the other spots. I feel like we need a will linebacker back. Every time we did get beat with the linebackers, it's in coverage, whether it's the slot receivers or tight ends. So that's a guy I think we should look at possibly in the 3rd round if we don't go, linebacker in the 1st round. Adam, who's the one you had an eye on?
Well, I actually had him in my pre-Senior Bowl write-up. Interesting prospect, Chaz Surratt out of UNC. This guy was a former quarterback. First 2 years, he had injury issues. Mainly was to his hand. He had a torn ligament, so the new coaching staff came in. He convinced him to switch to linebacker. Man, first year, he was the top on the team. Leading tackler, I think he was 2nd in the ACC. In 2 years, we're talking about 91 solo tackles, 22 tackles for a loss, 12.5 sacks, 5 passes defended, 2 forced fumbles, and 2 fumble recoveries. This guy is just all over the field. You're talking about edge guys. I haven't really focused on edge guys, but this is a guy that UNC had him line up at all 3 linebacker positions and rush off the edge. So I'm not focused on straight edge guys. I'm looking for more tweeners. That's the kind of prospects I really focus on. I see Ron Rivera kind of shift in that direction, but Chaz Surratt, about 6'1.5", 227. Get him up to around that 235, 240 range. Then you have a guy that can really play all over the field in Jack Del Rio's defense. But Chaz Surratt, UNC, this guy, having that extra 3rd round pick this year for that Williams trade, I think this is going to be a spot where, depending where they go early, if they go linebacker early, they could go receiver at that. We're talking about Jalen Darden, guys like that in that 3rd round range. Or if they go the reverse receiver early, guys like Chaz Surratt and Browning, guys like you mentioned, will be in that early day 3 range. So, this draft is just loaded with a lot of unknowns. So I think as evaluators, we kind of have to take stories sometimes, which is what I did before this Senior Bowl. Looked at Chaz Surratt, looked at Richie Grant, a couple other guys, and just really broke it down what I think fits in Washington. And I think these kind of tweener guys, that's exactly what Washington is missing at the positions, because I think on defense, they've got a lot of the core pieces. A lot of those backups that can offer different things that we were hoping we would see Khalif Hudson in that Viper role. I think there's guys in this draft who can actually fill that in a better role than he is. So, just a lot of tweener guys that can offer, a lot of different skill sets. So Chaz Surratt's a guy, early guy I like for that day 3 range.
Yeah, we saw Hudson getting more of a role throughout the end of the season too, which I thought was, something to keep an eye on. But Nate, we need some help with the linebacker role. Who's the savior you're calling on?
Yeah, well, I mean, with linebacker, you're talking about no depth, guys. I mean, they really just have like 2 guys, right? I mean, so remember they're losing Bostic too, and Kevin Pierre as well. And I thought, like, when we talk about linebacker, if you read on Twitter, they make it seem like our linebacker play was like some of the worst in the league. And when you really go and look at the numbers, like, honestly, it was like par, if not better. I mean, if you actually do look at the numbers. So maybe like the frontline starters aren't terrible, but you can obviously upgrade, and depth, no matter what, is so imperative, right? So a guy I really like, Josh, that you're probably very familiar with is, of course, my guy from LSU, Jabril Cox. Now, Jabril Cox is a lot like Zavion Collins in a lot of ways. I know you love him too. So he's kind of like a poor man's Zavion Collins, right? So he's excellent. He can rush the passer. He can do that. He can do it on the edge. I mean, he was disrupting offensive tackles all 3 practices. He was doing that. And those are like premier tackles too. I mean, it was a really good class that went down there for the Senior Bowl. And then Cox he's comfortable playing in space. He's instinctual. He's smart. And with linebacker, the first thing I look for is coverage. You have to be able to coverage. I'm not looking for thumpers like we used to like 10 years ago, because it's a passing league. You can't be a liability where the team is targeting you on 3rd down on those critical down and distances. So that's like imperative for me. So Cox is comfortable playing anywhere on the field. So I really like him. Another later round guy I guess I like is like Patty Fisher from Northwestern.
Dude, what a name.
Yeah, I know, man.
The Fighting
Patty
Reese
Fisher.
Davis.
Yeah, so Patty Fisher, Northwestern was really good. People are talking about like, oh man, why did Justin Fields have such a bad game against Northwestern? Well, Northwestern has a top 20 defense. They're excellent, and Patty Fisher was a big reason for that. But he's a guy who could play like special teams, and he's probably more of a project linebacker, but someone you can get like the middle of day 3 that we obviously need some depth. So I know he's maybe not the most sexy name, but he's someone I'm interested in.
There's a guy named Riley Cole. That's as white as it gets. He kind of played like Holcomb does. South Alabama guy. I was like, all right, this guy's like local, so like everyone's cheering for him. During the game, he had like 6 or 7 tackles. He definitely led the game in tackles.
He's good, bro. He's good.
Yeah, he was a solid guy.
Soon. He's a good one, man. I've been following him. He's awesome.
Yeah, I really like him. Donovan, who's someone that you're thinking we should keep an eye on?
Yeah, thinking towards the later rounds as well. Like Nate mentioned, Charles Snowden out of Virginia. He's got great length. He's listed at like true 6'6". It worries me a little bit playing in the box, being that, 6'6", kind of getting your leverage and everything in the run game. But he's the guy that I believe he broke his ankle last season, so he missed a lot of it, if not all of it.
He was hurt at the Senior Bowl too. He didn't do much there, but yeah.
He's a guy that can cover tight ends, which I think is something that we kind of talked about. Landon Collins kind of filling that role when he comes back is like, that kind of spin down guy. But I really like Charles Snowden, like Nate mentioned, kind of a project though. I don't know if he'd come in and start day 1. But he reminds me of what Josh Harvey-Clemens should have been. Yeah. Right? Josh Harvey-Clemens was 6'4", 6'5", kind of that lengthy, rangy linebacker hybrid role. And so I think Charles Snowden could fill in well here.
Yeah, UVA cranks out some good linebackers too, like under the radar, some sure tacklers. I forgot who went out last year, but he was like top 3 or 4 in the league in tackles this season. But I would love Snowden, definitely someone to keep an eye on later on. But let's talk about the DBs, because I know Nate is just itching to talk about his guys. So Nate, go ahead. Let's talk about Moneybags, Richie Rich. I'll let you lead the way.
Yeah, so going into the Senior Bowl, Richie Grant out of UCF, he's a senior free safety. So he's played all 4 years. He was looked at as like a maybe late day two pick. And then going in the Senior Bowl now, he's a lock for a top 50 pick. He's probably the number 2 safety in the class after Morig. And you could even say he's maybe number 1, depending on who you talk to. But I know Dane Brugler from The Athletic is really high on him, and rightfully so. I mean, the guy's getting multiple interceptions during practice. He's the quarterback of the defense. UCF defense was pretty awesome because they also had Aaron Robinson, who's another top 50 type pick. He was the catalyst for everything there. Richie Grant was. I mean, he was calling all the plays. He was diagnosing the offense, and he's seen it all because he's been there for such a long time. But and I talked about this before, but he's such a cerebral player. He's making constant in-game adjustments. And when I talk about in-game adjustments, that's huge because that's something that Jack Del Rio and Ron Rivera, you saw them do during the game. I mean, they're constantly nitpicking and changing things and adapting to what the offense is doing. And that's something Richie Grant can help with. And he's a true prototype, free safety too. We don't really have that on the roster right now. He's like the perfect match there. But I mean, if you're also talking about defensive back, I might as well talk about Aaron Robinson too. So Aaron Robinson was his teammate. He was actually, Josh, you might be kind of familiar with him because he was a recruit for Alabama. I don't know if he was a 4-star or a 5-star, but originally he was supposed to go to Alabama. So that gives you a glimpse into what type of talent he has, obviously. But yeah. So he went to UCF. They had a coaching staff changeover, but originally he played nickelback for them. And you ask, why did he play nickelback? Well, in their defense,
I don't really like the band,
but yeah. But for UCF, he played nickelback originally, and it was because for their defense, the nickelback was the most important position, and they usually had the best players playing in the slot. So they would put Aaron Robinson there on purpose. And that's really important because as a nickelback, you guys know this, you have to come up and make a lot more tackles because you're closer to the line of scrimmage. And a lot of times you're on the strong side too. So they run to that side a lot more. But he's a physical player. And then on top of that, he went back for his senior season, switched to the outside. And the reason he did that is so he could be a better draft pick. He wanted to go back to college to work on being more vocal, being a better leader, interviewing. He did all the little things to work on. And then also playing on the outside and the inside makes him a more versatile draft pick. And I think he's secured a spot in the top 50 because he's so smart and competitive. He's kind of a quiet natured guy, but he's very smart and he's another guy who likes to make in-game adjustments. He is constantly doing that. If you watch him during games, they'll from one series to the other, he'll pick up on what the offense is doing and make adjustments on the fly. And he has the athleticism to back it up. So Aaron Robinson, Richie Grant, 2 teammates from UCF that I'm big on.
Well, it's funny you mentioned 2 teammates because me and Adam kind of had 2 teammates too. And that's the Trey squared. We got Trey Norwood and Trey Brown, both 2 guys who made a lot of plays. University of Oklahoma. I think Trey Brown had 3 or 4 interceptions that week at practice. We talked about how impressive it is getting interceptions on one-on-ones, and you're getting, you're supposed to get. It's where the wide receiver is supposed to look good, pretty much through the drills. But Trey Brown is cutting off everything. I know he's a smaller guy. I know Adam has his measurements. He's 5'8.5", almost 5'9", pushing it. So small guy. I was saying before this, I like my corners tall. I like my DBs 6'1", 6'2" kind of range. But still, if you have that instinct to just get to the ball, you're cutting dudes off. It doesn't matter how big you are. If you're anticipating their routes, getting there before they are, and just physically outworking them, and you're way smaller than they are, then you're winning in my book. But the one guy I had was from Florida State, Hamza Nasruddin. Very hard name to say. Adam has one that's even harder than mine, so I'm going to let him eat on that one. But 6'3", 213, 82 and 3/4 wingspan. That is huge. That is exactly what I want in the defense.
Damn pterodactyl.
That's the Devontae Smith of the defense. But talk about versatile players. A lot of players in this class are, versatile. You can line them up. If you look up their draft profiles, it's you can, line them up as a true outside corner. You can do sub package with them. You can move them inside. Some can even play free safety. I know Hamza actually played some free safety a little bit. That's something he does need to work on. But still, great hands, fast, physical, athletic, has that downhill burst. When it is a run play, he's going to get there quick. He kind of reminds me of a Cam Curl, just the way he, his instinct to get to the ball quick, sure tackler kind of guy. But I think he'd be a great compliment to Curl. He's not afraid of tight ends. He did tear his ACL. That's something you mentioned, Nate, before we started recording back in 2019. And he still came back and played 2 games in 2020. He didn't have to. Like, what do you have to prove? Like, you're going to play 2 games. FSU had, 6 games canceled throughout the season. Like, it was a mess. This guy's coming back from ACL injury. He's like, you know what? Forget it. This is, my career. I'm going to go out here and ball, regardless of who the coaches and stuff are. 2 games. He had 13 tackles, 5 solo, 1.5 tackles for loss, an interception, and a pass deflection. So to me, that's a guy that just wants to play. Passionate about the game. Says, I don't care if I have a torn ACL. I'm coming back. Definitely has a high ceiling with his natural-born gifts. Like I said, I do want to see him get a little bit better when he does play single high safety. At times, he was a little lost. But just a great guy to be a project, a 3rd-round pick. I mean, we saw what we got out of Cam Curl in the 7th. So another 3rd-round pick guy. Like you said, we have 2 at him. We can use one for linebacker, use another one for a safety or a DB. Donovan, who's someone you are looking at in the backfield?
Yeah, I'm looking a little bit at Ambry Thomas out of Michigan. He was a really highly rated recruit. Kind of took him a little while to get going. And again, I'm born and raised Columbus, Ohio, so I'm never going to miss an opportunity to mess with Michigan a little bit. But he's a talented guy who's got some really legit speed. And I think he's about 5'11", maybe 6 foot, somewhere in between there. So he's not kind of that lengthy, 6'2" corner like you were talking about. But he's a guy that could add a lot of speed to that backfield, which is never going to be, a bad thing to add. So I think, he's a guy you could look at, kind of day 3 range, maybe sneaks up, into a late 3rd-round pick if he continues to have, any kind of pro day. But he's a guy I've been looking at.
Yeah, and that's someone I actually noticed there I haven't really looked too much into, so I'm glad you brought him up. Someone else I need to put on my list. But Adam, you had a guy that we were both taking a look at from Syracuse. Talk a little bit about him.
Yeah, the name, excuse me if I get it wrong, Afide Melifonwu. Some people remember his brother, Obi, his big brother, was actually out of UConn. He's bounced around. He was with New England, I think, this past year. But this prospect, he's the definition of a boom or bust. I keep getting drawn to the tweeners. This one is just a shade under 6'3", 212, about almost an 81-inch wingspan. Has only played in 23 games, but he had 21 solo tackles, but 19 passes defended. So he's a definition of a guy that you can develop. He's worth taking that 6th, 7th round flyer on. I don't know if he could be able to pack enough pounds to be that sub-package kind of dime linebacker that, I wrote about today that, maybe Landon Collins can be. But I just like these guys. They don't have enough depth right now at any kind of DB or safety position. So when I keep coming across these late-round guys, I just think the more the merrier, especially if they can get in the late round or undrafted. Because really, Washington has not very much depth right now. Darby leaves, it's even less after that. So I like a guy, Ifeatu Melifonwu. Like I said, 6th, 7th round, undrafted perhaps. It's a guy that they could, really get involved in early downs. And, if they're going to go big package, he's a guy that can bring down the box. But, again, definition of a boom or bust. But, again, the bloodline, let's see if he can do more than his brother did.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions going into the offseason with, safety. Obviously, with Jeremy Reeves, we saw some flashes with him. But the biggest thing is just consistently. Can he do that in a 16-game season? We don't know. What can you expect out of Jeremy Reeves? I know we got 7th round value out of Cam Curl, and he's balling. That's cool. But you can't expect that out of everybody. So, to me, I think we definitely will go safety. We'll talk about some more guys that I like in the safety role later on as we get closer to the draft. Another corner that stood out to me was Keith Taylor Jr. from Washington. Another guy, 6'2", 191. That's perfect. That's exact size I want in my corner. Played mostly outside. He played inside in the dime package. Just really lengthy. The build helps him with his coverage and his tackles. But he did his best work in the press. Sometimes got caught looking at the ball in the backfield in the bail technique, which is when you're playing, pretty far off the wide receiver. Just kind of had this eye candy of just looking into the backfield too much. But another guy, like I said, just size alone, you can work with them. Had a lot of great drills, was going up against top guys at the Senior Bowl. On the one-on-ones, like I was talking about, that's where I want to see what kind of techniques you're using as a DB, because you don't have any help. It's just you and this wide receiver on the island, and he has free range wherever he can go. So Keith looked good in the practices, kept up with a lot of the guys, didn't really have any big plays that he let up that were noticeable to me. So any other corners, Nate, that you were keeping an eye on that were at the Senior Bowl?
Hey Josh, I got a good one for you. If you like big tall cornerbacks, how about Benjamin St. Juste from Minnesota? 6'3", 205 pounds. You're talking about Canada, the top defensive back prospect from Canada. He was originally a Michigan recruit, so I'm sure Donovan can like talk some trash on him. But so St. Juste, he's interesting. He's kind of grabby. He's not very disciplined when you watch him play. But I feel that a lot of that is coachable. But what he does bring is like you can't teach that height and that size and that athleticism. And he also brings, and this is a key word, we keep talking about the Senior Bowl, he brings versatility, right? You talk about versatility, so huge. You have defensive ends changing into interior defensive end. You have running backs changing into receivers. You have St. Juste, who plays cornerback, but he also played safety during the Senior Bowl. So he played a little bit of both. And that's kind of intriguing because you want a guy who can kind of play all over the field and find a place. So that's going to be big. But he's a guy who definitely intrigues me a lot. Like I said, 6'3", 205 pounds is huge for a cornerback. I mean, that's a guy you can put on the boundary. And there's a lot of smaller receivers, especially in this draft class. So I'm really interested in him. He's kind of fits that Richard Sherman mold a little bit.
Yeah, we're not going to talk bad about Michigan commits because Najee Harris was once a Michigan commit, and obviously he made the better decision, and his career turned out just fine. But Nate, you brought up one thing today that I wanted you to talk about a little bit. I actually didn't even tell you I was going to do this, but you're good at what you do, so I'm going to do it anyways. You talk about, falling into this pit of like positionless players. How do you avoid getting a guy like a Sua Cravens, who I hate even mentioning his name, into the defense? You talk about versatile, but how does it become too much of versatility? You're not just really good at one thing, you're just good at a bunch of little things. You just kind of have to find your spot, like Simmons and Reddick from the Cardinals, who's obviously turned out well where they're sticking him. But you just have like these positionless players in the NFL. How do you not fall into that pit of just not having a true place to go?
Yeah, it's all about mitigating risk. So you want some positionless players, but you don't want too many, because if they don't pan out, it's really hard to know what to do with them. So when I mean like positionless players, the reason it's hard with those guys is because you have to have a coaching staff that's open, that has an open mind to build around their strengths and play them where they're best. And when Isaiah Simmons went to Arizona at first, they just kept him as a middle linebacker. And it's really hard to do that, especially when you don't have OTAs, you don't have training camp, and you're just sitting in linebacker rooms all day. Like, it's hard just to learn one position, let alone multiple positions at the same time. So you need to be, you want guys like that, but you don't want too many at the same time, because it increases that risk a lot. So it really just depends. Sua Cravens is the ultimate example, because it sounds a lot like Jock, to be honest. So like Jock is kind of a similar player. He plays that hybrid safety role, or the Viper in a lot of ways, but he can rush the passer. He can play against linebacker or against running backs and against tight ends. But sometimes it's hard for those guys to just pick up on a single position, let alone multiple positions. So you just have to be careful, like I talked about.
Yeah, and I did make a list of some honorable mention guys, and I wanted to save this at the end because it's going to kill me to give any kind of props to an Auburn kid. But KJ Britt was all over the field at the Senior Bowl. What I look for is the guys who people just, immediately just turn to as like their guy. Like, they just gravitate towards your personality. And there was a couple of guys on offense. To me, it was Darby from Arizona State, but on the defense, KJ Hill from Auburn. KJ Britt, not KJ Hill. KJ Britt from Auburn killed it all week long. And I feel like we need like that kind of leadership. We talk about needing like a leading linebacker, like a Luke Kuechly. That would be nice. But just someone who's going to step up on the defense. Obviously, we have Chase Young holding down the D-line and those guys. But I'm looking for a guy to just step up in the linebacker core. And that was one guy that really stood out to me. Two guys that really had probably the worst week ever. Tough Borland. It was more like tough week, because he got bodied by Khalil Herbert. It's like Khalil Herbert saved up all of his wrestling bars and just hit him with a rock bottom on this one play where they were just doing running back blockings. And I was like, after that, just tag out, but just go home. You just got bodied by a running back on a
Herbert took out all of his frustration from playing at KU all those years.
It's true. No, he looked terrible. And then Shaka Toney. That was another guy. I was like, all right, pass rush guy, pretty good size. I want to see what this guy has. we talked about Quinn Miners. He literally put him in a washing machine one play, just spun him around like 3 times and then just shoved him on the ground. But that was all week long. I was really disappointed in those two guys. But like my biggest like Debbie Downers of the week were Jamie Newman on offense and then Shaka Toney and Tough Borland on defense. I mean, you have Devontae Smith burning you in the national championship game. This is like your redemption moment for Tough Borland, and you just get bodied by a running back instead, which is way worse. But that wraps up Senior Bowl talk. Obviously, we have some more guys to talk about with free agency coming up and the draft. Like I said, we're going to talk linebackers next. Little sneak peek. My favorite guy is Zaven Collins in the draft. Not going to talk too much about him. Nate, who's your favorite guy without giving away too much?
Yeah, so I'm not big on taking off-ball linebackers in round 1. I just don't think it's when you talk about all the defensive positions.
All right, so we're going to Adam.
I mean, if you just think, I know it sounds like stupid, but when you think about it logically, just if you stack it up, you have your edge rushers, you have cornerback, you probably have interior defensive linemen or safety, and linebackers down at the bottom because their job is to stop the run, which it's not a running league anymore. Now, It doesn't mean they're not very important, but it also means they're easier to find replacements for. And this draft class is awesome. It's very deep. I mean, there's 7 or 8 linebackers that can start on day 1 for us. But that doesn't mean we want to settle for 7 or 8. So there's a few guys I like. I guess if I had to nail it down to one, I really like. Everyone likes Nick Bolton. I mean, what else?
I knew you were going to say that. I was going to say Bolton.
But I think Bolton is going to go at the end of round 1, and it would be a stretch for me to take him at pick 19. I would be interested in pick 19 potentially trading back, depending on what happens, depending on who's off the board. If you were to trade back to 28, 29, and someone like Bolton is still there, then I wouldn't be complaining as much because you're still getting value. You're probably getting at least another day 2 pick and maybe a future day 2 pick, later on down the road. But I mean, obviously, Surratt's a guy that, Surratt has been linked to this team for 2 years. It's kind of crazy. I will say, we always just talk about the good things, and Surratt is very smart. He has a nose for the ball. He's always around the ball. But I will say one thing I don't like, he misses a lot of tackles and he gets blown up a lot by offensive linemen. He's always around the ball, which is just perfect, but sometimes he'll just get blown up. You'll see it when you watch him a little bit, but
it's just not effective.
Exactly. It's not always the case. I mean, he put up some huge stats like Adam was talking about, but if you could get him in round 3, that's a great value. But I mean, there are so many good backers in this class that I'm not too worried about it. And free agency, man, talk about some of the guys that obviously Levante David, but Milano is a guy I love from Buffalo. He's the perfect coverage linebacker, and he can be the quarterback of your defense. And he's probably going to get a market deal, but he's also dealt with some injuries, kind of like Sheriff. So maybe you can get a little bit of a discount with him, but he's someone and he has a lot of connections with Ron Rivera too, because of McDermott coaching over there. So I could see that maybe working out as well.
Yeah, I think we definitely upgrade the position. I think that's not a doubt at all. Donovan, who's one guy linebacker wise in the draft that you are just hoping lands in Washington?
I really like Baron Browning. I mean, there's a lot to be said about kind of the first round graded guys, but I'm with you, Josh. Baron Browning is a guy who was overshadowed a little bit because of, he played with Malik Harrison at Ohio State and Raekwon McMillan for a little bit, 2 guys that were, studs at linebacker. And so I think he's a guy that, they lined him up on edge quite a lot at Ohio State. He's a guy that was a really highly recruit. I think he was the number 1 linebacker in his class, if not one of the top 2 or 3.
Should have been to Bama.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Not everyone can go to Bama.
McMillan almost did too.
He did, but Browning is a guy that I think is pretty versatile, and he's big enough to play in the box, but he's athletic enough to be out in coverage. And I think he's a guy who could kind of sneakily be a long-term upper tier kind of starter, not necessarily Pro Bowl caliber, but a guy that you're not gonna have to worry about.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of options in the draft for day 1 starters. Obviously, me and Adam are full on the Zaven Collins train. I want that true, just nasty middle linebacker for us. I think he'd fit perfect. I told Adam I'm so against what Matt Miller said, moving him to the edge. I get it. He's 260. He's huge. He does a phenomenal job getting to the quarterback, but his ball skills are too good to just tell him to put his hand in the ground. Why take that away from him? I feel like he would be a great true Mike linebacker in the 4-3. I don't care what anyone says. If he's there at 19, I feel like we should take it. But to Nate's point, trading back, there's teams like New Orleans and New England who want to trade up and get Mac Jones if he's there. We can absolutely move back into the later 20s, mid 20s if we want to, and still get some great picks. I'm sure Nate has some wide receivers floating around in the mid 20 range for sure that he wants. Maybe we'll get both Surratt's in Washington. That'd be nice.
Oh.
He's another guy. He kind of stood out to me a little bit this week, but I was kind of disappointed in him. I was like, Sage, like I wanted some more from you. You had a whole year off, bud. Like you should be fresh right now. These routes is looking rusty. So, gentlemen, if y'all want to go ahead and plug in your Twitters, Adam, we will start with you, sir.
Sure. You can find me at the BNG Report, and my new site again is theburgundyandgoldreport.com. We have a section customized for draft for Washington fans. Took the inspiration of the football card idea. You go to our site, you go to the draft prospect section, you click on the card, you get all you need to know, eval, YouTube, everything is all there for you. Washington football news there. Come check us out, theburgundyandgoldreport.com.
Yep, checked it out. Got some cool guys that I was looking forward to coming up in the coming soon section for the prospects. Can't wait to see. Nate, plug yourself in, Mr. Jayhawk Chalk.
Hey, thanks for having me again, Josh. Guys, you can catch me on the Twitter streets at Jayhawk Chalk. We can debate about receivers and quarterbacks and whatever else you want to talk about. Breakout age, all those stupid like metrics that some people care about and some people don't. But yeah, so Jayhawk Chalk, check out the work at Full Press Coverage at Washington, and I'll see you guys next time.
I saw someone today. I forgot who it was. I meant to tell you, Nate. Their breakout age was like 17 and a half. I'll have to look up in my
Brian Edwards has like the lowest. Brian Edwards from last year on the Raiders, and then Rondell Moore has an 18
I
age
think it's
breakout.
Rondell's really young. That's what it was.
It's amazing. There's never been someone do what he's done at his age. I mean, I could wax poetic about Rondell Moore. I hate to say it, Josh. I'm going to hurt your feelings. I like Rondell Moore more than Waddle. I don't care.
He's awesome. Man.
I love him. I mean, Waddle's going to get drafted way earlier, and he'll be awesome.
I don't think it'll be way. I think it's closer than people think. I think we'll talk about it. Yeah. Donovan, plug yourself in. We can literally talk about wide receivers all day long, and I will stand Waddle and Devontae Smith till the day I die. Donovan, go ahead, bud.
I'm on Twitter at Donnie Mac, DONNY Mac 98. You're going to catch me here working with these guys a lot more often. Looking to do some O-line breakdowns here soon. Of course, my favorite position group. So yeah, catch me on there, Donnie Mac 98.
Yep, D-Mac, Patty Whack, get your dog a bone. He's going to be doing some write-ups for us. The website is going soon. Don't give me that look, Nate. I just thought of that in the shower like an hour ago. I was trying to think of good intros for everybody. That's all I had.
We'll edit that out.
Before Nate puts his picture up of Rondell Moore in the background, I'm going to head out. We will see y'all later on next week, and we will talk linebackers coming up. Peace.
I've been trying to make it last, make it move. But I'ma hop in this point and like a fool. I've been ungrateful, I'm